Welcome to Everything Co-op, bringing you information on how cooperatives can help improve your quality of life. This show is being sponsored by the National Co-op Bank, NCB. The NCB is dedicated to strengthening communities nationwide for the delivery of banking and financial services for the nation's cooperatives, their members, and other socially responsible organizations. For more information on the power of community ownership, visit ncb.coop. That's ncb.coop. Now stay tuned for your host, Vernon Oakes.
Good morning, everybody. This is Vernon Oakes. Welcome to Everything Co-op. This beautiful Thursday morning in D.C. It's sunny today, a little chilly. And we have Dr. Caroline Hossein on with us today, and she's written a book called The Banking Ladies and the Future of Solidarity Economy. Good morning, Dr. Hossein.
Hi, good morning, Vernon. A pleasure to be here again on Everything Co-op.
I am so glad that you've taken time out to talk to us this morning. Can I call you Caroline, or you want Dr. Hossein?
No, of course, we know each other, so okay. Caroline is perfect.
So you're a Canadian research chair in the Africana Development and Feminist Political Economy and an associate professor of global development studies. And you're the founding member of the Diverse Solidarity Economies Collective, known as DISE. DISE. Okay, which works to amplify culturally rooted community economics around the world. You're author of the book that I talked earlier about the banker ladies, and that's what I want to get into, which centers the economic leadership of Black women and other racialized women whose financial systems often go unseen, but sustain the entire community. Welcome, Caroline, to Everything Co-op. It's like before, always a pleasure to talk to you, and I'm going to jump right into it. For listeners who may not know, how would you describe solidarity economy in everyday terms, please, not in academic language?
Yeah, well, thank you, Vernon, for inviting me on the show to share about my latest book called The Banker Ladies. This book is pretty much central to what we know as the solidarity economy. And these women encapsulate everything that is collective, everything that is cooperative.
Recording in progress.
Rooted in mutual aid and reciprocity, caring for one another in a very conscientious way, not doing lip service, but really thinking through and with others about issues that are affecting them. And so the solidarity economy, I have come to relearn it through people who do it in practice. And these are the very women who are cooperative minded, meaning that they live and breathe the 7 principles that all cooperatives should be hearing, and they prioritize a concern for community. So the solidarity economy, I think in layman's terms, would be one that is cooperative, one that is feminist thinking in terms of really thinking about a caring economy, social provisioning, but also daring to go into arenas that may be very complex or exclusionary. And that, for me, is what the solidarity economy is. It's about membership institutions, people who are thinking really deeply about how to undo corporatized economic systems and put people at the center of that.
That sounds like exactly what co-ops are. The 7 principles, community at the center. And I like I'll talk about the values first. The first value of cooperation is self-help, which I always find it interesting. That's the first value. How do you help self? And then with self-responsibility, There are certain responsibilities that you have to do if you're going to be in a group. Doing it democratically, equity, equality, and then solidarity. Solidarity is the sixth value, but it's like the group make decisions that's best. Decisions are made for best for the group, and everybody then gets self-helped. But it's the group first, and individuals second, or not at all. But it's the group first. And I like the ethical values of honesty, openness, social responsibilities, and caring for others. And you just went through all of that in your
Yeah,
definition
very similar.
of what the banker ladies are in practice every day. They are living this experience.
Correct.
That's nice. Now, who are the banker ladies, and
So it's,
why did you feel you had to tell their stories?
yeah, so the banker ladies hail from, it's a long legacy of cooperators. So they belong and they organize these institutions that are informal membership institutions known as ROSCAs. That's the short name, but their ROSCAs stand for Rotating Savings and Credit Associations. And they're a distinct entity. They're not a premature cooperative. They are just a different form of a cooperative institution that are primarily informal, that have a starting point and an ending point of people who know and trust each other, create these financial systems, peer lending, and rotate their savings to help one another. And in these groups called ROSCAs, there is usually a group of women who are thinking conscientiously about financial but also non-financial self-help, as you mentioned earlier, but they're thinking of it as within a group mindset. And these women call themselves the banker ladies. And the banker ladies are these women, cooperators, who are thinking about money, but also how do we create a sense of belonging and camaraderie with people who often are at the brunt or the harsh end of this growth thesis of corporate capitalism. And so these women are rethinking economics collectively in ways to kind of stymie the brutality of individual capitalism. The banker ladies are these members. They are first and foremost members, and they're often guided by someone called a chief banker lady. And that's usually the person who kind of rallies the group together through consensus and democracy building to create these groups. And so members refer to themselves as banker ladies.
Okay. So, have you ever been in these groups, banker lady?
Yeah, I have even organized a Rosca. So I grew up knowing about these systems. I'm of Caribbean heritage. I was born in the U.S. and we migrated when I was fairly young to Canada. My parents are both from various parts of the Caribbean. These traditions are ancestral, they're carried down. It's like an heirloom of how to cooperate with money, with others. It's really a communing experience. And sometimes you don't even know the elders are doing it because it's so social, right? It could be at a party or a potluck or a barbecue, but people are sharing money on the sidelines, or often we are told to deliver a small little bag to some lady down the street. You're not quite sure what you're delivering. It could be a treat or it could be a deposit for someone's savings, their hand that they have to turn in. So I grew up seeing and having witnessed that these things exist. My father was an immigrant to Canada in 1971, and he used a box hand They don't call it a loan. They call it like it's a pot of money that people contribute to. And in turn, everyone in the group gets access to a lump sum of someone's savings. And so basically, he used his first lump sum to get his first vehicle, which I think it was like some sort of Comet vehicle, secondhand car to get around back in the day because he had no credit history as a young Caribbean man back in 1971. So this kind of system has been with me. A few years ago, I organized a ROSCA system for a member of a group that I was a part of whose son was murdered. And in that ROSCA, we didn't expect any repayment back. We actually created a SUSU, that's a local name for these ROSCAs, to sort of pool money. It's almost like the GoFund or crowdfunding platforms, but people who knew this person just put in, what monies they could to kind of mitigate some of the worries that people have to deal with when you're burying your kid. You know what I mean? And it gave the person a comfort to do that, but also to go back home where they came from, just to get some, some reprieve from the pain that they were witnessing every day. So I organized that. And I've been a part of a ROSCA during the pandemic. It was a way to connect with people. A group of women did it. We did it virtually, so it was by e-transfer, which is not the norm. But, during the lockdown, it was a sense of community. We were putting in $100 a month. I think it went for 6 months. There was about a small group of 6 of us. And it was actually an excellent way to connect with people, knowing that, and then it was fun also getting my lump sum of money to do what I wanted with it. And so, I've been part of these systems. I've witnessed them growing up, and now I study them.
Okay. Now, I want to go back to this $100 a month during the pandemic, so it was recent. 6 months. So if you put in $100 for 6 months, you're putting in $600. Yeah. You've got 6 people. So that's a total of $3,600 that's collected.
Yeah. Sounds about right.
How does that work? How do you get, you said a hand. So I assume when it comes time for you to pull down some savings, you will get something. What is that you get back?
You get what you put into it. So if everyone puts in $100 every month, you do it until everyone in turn receives that savings. So if we do it monthly, it's $100, 6 women, everyone gets $600 a month. Yeah?
Yes. Now, I would suggest that, so that means that if in the first month, if you did it in January of this year, the chief banker lady would get $600 from the 6 people. She would put in 100 and get another 500.
5 others, yeah.
So does the first hand go out in January or February? Or
it depends on the group. I mean, this is a very democratic system. Every ROSCA group is different. It may very well start on January 1st. They simplify, keep things simple is sort of the motto of these groups. They usually have the correct number of members for the months that they're doing, so it doesn't get complicated. I mean, there are more complicated ways of doing systems, but for just simplicity's sake, 6 members, 6 months, started in January, ended in June. And everyone gets 6. This is not a pyramid scheme. No one's going to benefit. There's no extra money that people are going to make. It's basically forced savings, if you want to think about it. It's kind of disciplining you to save and make sure you make your contribution in a monthly way, because there's 5 other people counting on you. If you get the first hand, I usually time my hand depending on what it is I want to do. So say I like to go away in February, it would be nice for me to get it in February so that I have a lump sum of cash to take with me on my trip. Some people time it based on a kind of a business activity. If it's in September, They may need to buy school supplies to sell. You see what I
Okay.
mean? So people tend to have it organized, but there are issues. There can be issues that arise if people don't get it in a timely way. Some people do lottery, like based on like whose name gets pulled. But generally, the Roscas I've been a part of, the chief banker lady is like, knows everyone's issues and who they are. And, you know, the group, I mean, it's people who kind of know and trust each other. And so someone might be like, I want it first, you know, because it's kind of like you get access to a lot of money first. And I mean, if you're waiting at the very end, maybe it's not so ideal because you have to be the last one to get it. But, you know, that rotates. There's always someone that gets it last. I've been towards the end of a Rosca pool. I didn't like it too much. But then the next time in the next round, I let them know that. And so they bumped me up earlier. Newer people tend to be like people who've just joined. They get it at the very end. So it's just a way of managing risk. And, you know, it's like you talk to one another to see where you fall in the timeline, right? So yeah, those things, those kind of rules and regulations are really discussed in these quote unquote informal institutions that people worry about. These institutions actually, if you think about it, have pretty set norms and governance when it comes to managing the distribution and the allocation of these monies. Yeah.
I guess you'd put new people at the end because there's something that you've said twice now. You've used the word trust. I have it that trust is at the heartbeat of a co-op. And this is definitely one. If I put in 100 in the first month, in the second month, February, I get out 600, then the other people have to trust that I'm going to continue to put my $100 in, even though I've already gotten mine. So that trust turns out to be extremely important in these informal institutions.
Correct. Yeah, I agree with that. So you can see the logic of how people are working with each other to make up these ideas, right? Like, it's not someone that comes in and tells you this is what we're doing. The group actually convenes, and usually in a very civilized way, right? They come together. They might have fish samosas. If you're Somali, they may have great jerk chicken. If you're Jamaican, you know, Trinidadian mango chutney, wrap rotis are delicious.
Come on.
You know,
Let's forget about the banking. I want to go to the food. That's
yeah.
all.
Well,
Okay.
you see, that's what I mean. Like so much of part of these Rosca systems is what we don't see. It's the camaraderie and the socializing that makes these institutions so special in modern times that people will have their bankers that they go to, their corporate or cooperative banks that they partake in. But there's also something really special about having a group of people who you do business with that you know and trust, and you can get advice on a number of facets of your life, right? That can be complex and hard to share with just anyone. So these banking institutions, which they are, because they're working and sharing people's hard-earned monies, savings with people they know and trust. And in that process, it's about learning and caring and eating, breaking bread. I study mostly African, Caribbean, and Black Canadian women. And it's always a very cultural event. It's focused on friendships. It's focused on kinship, which are all very key to, you know, having a sense of belonging. And, you know, the more I collaborate with others, like Sharon Austin at the University of Florida has done some tremendous work studying Roscas, thinking about giving circles in the U.S. context with immigrants and also with African Americans. And it's the same or similar kind of experience that I'm witnessing in Canada and across the Caribbean, that people really are centered on the human aspect of how we deal with finance and are kind of fatigued with only dealing with corporate forms of formal finance, that they are imagining how can we do money and share money more cooperatively in a way that's fun.
In a way that's fun.
Yeah.
So before we go any deeper, I want to ask this question very carefully and with tremendous respect. You share that this work is also very personal for you, that your father struggled deeply after losing his job at a bank in Canada. Would you be willing to share how that experience shaped your understanding of finance, dignity, and why this work matters so much?
Yeah, that's not an easy question often, you know. When I was writing this book, I wrote, so thank you for reading so closely the work. In the preface, actually, is where I tucked in that personal story.
Mm-hmm.
It's a story of trauma, actually, that has been buried. I was 12 years old, and I remember it was a relatively nice day, and I had to return my bicycle to the garage. And so I had a, everyday habit of, you close the garage where the car is and you open it up. And it was a weekend. And I remember opening that garage and it was smoky.
Mm-hmm.
And when I put the garage in, it was always on the driver's side, where there was a little space to stick my bike. And I saw my father and I was like, why is he sleeping in that vehicle? And that's when I realized something. I didn't know what to think. I just knew it's smoky in here and my dad is sleeping in the vehicle. I was 11 or 12 years old, right?
Mm-hmm.
Not as savvy as kids are nowadays, who would click into or clock in, as they say, into what's going on. And I just ran into the house. I asked my mother, I told my mother what I had seen, because I was trying to open the door, but I couldn't. But I did open the garage. I kept the garage open. And so by the time my mother came, she could smell the fumes and she was able to get in the car, but reprimanded me and told me to head back into the house, that I'm too busy in grown people's business.
Well, boy.
Right? And I think that was a form of protection.
Protection,
for me,
yeah.
right? Because there was trauma unfolding, really deep-seated problems. And back then, children didn't really know, particularly in the Caribbean household, how people dealt with money in terms of, or jobs, or what kind of work. People didn't complain, or you knew that there were stressors, but you didn't know that any of the details. I was 12. And so I went into the room, but we knew something was going on. And so it took months for my father to be okay. He was fine, but it took a while. The story is that he was fired pretty abruptly from one of Canada's big six banks, where he had been a branch manager.
Wow.
And he was the breadwinner for the family. And so when you take someone's livelihood away, and I'm sure many of your listeners could comprehend the kind of suffering that happens when you grow up with that kind of trauma. But we never spoke about it. It's something that everyone knew, but no one talks about. And still to this day, it's a site of a lot of pain and hurt. And it was even difficult for me to admit that this was my story.
Mm-hmm.
It's my story too, because I knew of the pain of growing up with someone who had to restart his life when he had a family to take care of, right? But wasn't well. And so with that comes a lot of hurt. And all you know is that these banks where we trust, to this day, I don't work with any of these corporate or commercial banks. And I couldn't understand. It's only when you get in later in life that you understand why you couldn't bank at certain places because of the hurt in your own sort of house.
Thank
I'm
you.
a cooperator. I'm a proud member of a credit union. I feel that that's sort of where the dignity and respect is. I'm not saying that credit unions and cooperatives are perfect by any means.
They're not.
But at least the business and the bottom line is a lot different in the ways in which they treat people who work there, and particularly people of color, Black and racialized people here in this country. So I knew at a very young age that I was going to do something in global development. I knew that I was going to focus on business exclusion and financial access. So my first book was actually on the Caribbean, and it was called Politicized Microfinance. It won a number of awards. I think that was my baby of a book. But I didn't realize until I was writing that book that there was still another story to be told. It probably should have been the first story, which is the banker ladies, because the trauma that I've shared with you, that I've hidden away, because there's a lot of shame with that story, at least in my family unit. It's something that no one wants to talk about because of pain. And I've realized that meeting and working with a lot of banker ladies, my story isn't so unique, actually.
Yeah.
You start to realize that lots of Black and racialized people have just been casted aside, thrown away, really have endured a lot of indignities and violence that comes out of the financialization that we have to work with to get on with our livelihoods in society. And so I've realized that here are a group of people who are in a way quietly protesting corporate finance all over the world. Canada is not unique. The Caribbean's not unique. These ROSCA systems carried out by banker ladies is world making. It's actually everywhere. It actually originates in the South. Africa is a bastion of ROSCA systems. Kenya has SACCO systems. The Susu of Ghana has been incorporated into their formal financial system. It's a recognized system. India has the chit system, curry system. These are legislated and recognized in so many countries as a form of financial help that is different from formal finance, and people have options. And so I've realized that it's just in the West that we scandalize informal institutions that have to address money issues when there are really blatant, harsh, violent financial issues happening to people. And that I wanted to be one of the voices to speak up about informal institutions, the value and why people seek refuge in these institutions, to have access to money, but also to take care of one another socially and give people a sense of belonging when they have none or feel like they belong nowhere.
Thank you for sharing that and bringing it all together. Yes.
Yeah.
I understand that story. And I have to believe that most people, Black, brown, indigenous people, have a story. But we're going to take a break. And we'll be right back and give examples of these banker ladies and the future of them. We'll be right back. Welcome back, everybody. This is Vernon Oakes, and the program is Everything Co-op, and we have Dr. Caroline Hossein on as our guest this morning. She's out of Canada. with roots in the Caribbean, since a little time growing up in the U.S. before they moved to Canada. And we are talking about Banker Ladies in her book, Banker Ladies, and she shared right before the break a traumatizing event that she witnessed when she was 11 or 12. Caroline, I've in my life, I've had numbers of events where finances have been a major issue, either in my parents' home or in my home, nothing as harsh as what you just described to us. The worst, and I don't know why my parents took me with them to go borrow some money, and they went to not a bank, but one of these loan companies, high interest loans. And it was just the three of us, my mom, my dad, and me, and talking to this chubby white man across the desk. And what struck me at 14 or so was how my father was like getting on his knees and pleading for this loan.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. He wasn't on his knees figuratively, but all dignity was gone. My father was a brave, courageous man that fought in World War II, and he could outrun all three of his sons and beat us all up with, we would wrestle and fight with him. He would beat us, all three of us. Okay. Well respected, 8th grade education, tremendous common sense. People in the neighborhood would come to him for advice. And to watch him be humiliated was shocking to me. That I remember I can sit right in that seat where I was, right beside my dad, looking at this white man. And then later to come find out, they probably paid 2 or 3 times the interest rate if they'd gone to a bank, and maybe 5 times more than a credit union would have been. So
Right.
I imagine that most people out there would have these stories if you were in a black family, a Hispanic family, indigenous, Caribbean, Somalian, in the U.S., in Canada. I always thought that Canada was better in terms of less racism because blacks had gone there. When you look at the Underground Railroad, going to Canada was it was the stop. So I always thought Canada was better than to find out it wasn't. Okay, that's you all experienced similar, if not same, racism as we have here. And the answer in terms of finance is we do our own financing.
Yeah. So much. I mean, thanks for sharing your story. This idea of indignity, humiliation, just structural violence that people of color have to go through because of how corporate finance is organized, makes people, particularly people of African descent, draw on those, I guess, those ancient legacies of economic cooperation. And so that's what inspires. That's what's so inspiring about the story of the banker ladies. I call them the vanguards of the solidarity economy because they're pushing our understanding of what it means to be a better cooperator, how to think about making room for informal institutions, how to acknowledge that people of African descent everywhere in the world are not learners of cooperatives, that they actually have historical grounding in what economic cooperatives are all about. So in Canada, it's one of these countries that prides itself, and rightly so, on being a teacher of cooperatives to North America with the Desjardins movement in the early 1900s, which is wonderful. As a teacher, as a student, I learned and respected our legacy as Canadians, the Eurocentric understanding of cooperatives. But I now have come full circle to understand that when we move timelines and geographies around, we have to have some sort of appreciation for the knowledge making and the experience and practice of people of African descent who've always been doing economic cooperativism and financial cooperativism in really ancient societies like, West Africa, Ghana, Mali, Senegal, the Yoruba people in Nigeria, South Africa. All of these countries have such a rich legacy of financial co-ops that when they arrive to Canada, US, UK, France, all of these European or Europeanized countries, predominantly white, does not mean that these people are ignorant or not understanding what formal co-ops are. They're actually the originators of what cooperativism is. And I think that that's what the banker ladies, in their very modest, quiet way, are saying to the world, particularly to the formal co-op sectors in the West, is that you don't have to teach us the 6 values or the 7 values of what it means to be a cooperative. We live and breathe that in our very DNA. And so that's the story of the banker ladies, right? It's kind of retooling our understanding of what cooperative economics is all about and making room for informalized institutions who are purposefully membership focused.
So you have said what I've come to understand and believe, that cooperativism is what we have been doing since the beginning of time, whether you're in the Sahara Desert fighting the saber-toothed tiger, you have to do that cooperatively. You have to do it together. Individual can't do that. Or if you, in the Ice Age, up in the caves in Europe, you have to work together to survive. So I have it that cooperation has been around since humanity has been around. And in 1844, white folks in Europe wrote down some rules, which are the principles and values of co-ops, which I like, but that's not the beginning of cooperation. 1844 is not the beginning. When the beginning of co-ops is beginning of time, and if you believe, as I do, time for humanity started in Africa, cooperation started in Africa at the beginning of time. These co-op ladies, these banker ladies, are just bringing up a form that is different from the 1844 where everything is written down. What white folks brought was everything written down, and then they say we discover it or we create it. No, stuff was created long before.
And I'm glad you're mentioning that, Vernon, because that book that you have in front of you, The Banker Ladies, I actually spent my sabbatical, part of my sabbatical was in Ethiopia and India. And the first part of it was in Ethiopia, in a place called Bahadar, in the Amhara region on the Blue Nile. And when I went there to do my research, but also to think and write about these Rosca systems, Ethiopians have a medley of cooperative institutions, from IDIR to the ICUB system, and various forms of formal and informal cooperatives that are well respected. Ethiopians said to me, and this is their tagline, right, in their country, land of origins. And they said to me, of course you would come to Ethiopia to write a book about Rosca system because we are the originators of the cooperative system. And I thought that that was so important for me to be in Ethiopia, to think through the difference, the difference in terms of how people respond to both formal and informal cooperative membership institutions, and how the tiering that we see in the West doesn't quite play out in Ethiopia that way. And the same story, or a familiar story to Ethiopia, was in India, in South India. I continued wrapping up the book, writing in South India, Kerala, at the University of Kerala, and to witness, not just how people were enamored by their curry or kitty system, which is their name for the Raska, but also how people really respected the ingenuity of women who often are excluded to figure out how membership institutions bring value. And not only should they bring value, but these women should be compensated for the labor that goes into developing cohesive and stronger democratic societies. And that's really where the work goes. It's like rethinking economic development, rethinking this idea of poverty alleviation and financial tools, rethinking why do we have superimposed ideas of microfinance when we do have banker ladies all over in our own backyards doing for free community economic development, and no one is recognizing this contribution to building up civil society. And that's really what my book is calling for. And it has created a bit of a ruffle in society, in the academy, about how we do philanthropy, how we do economic development, and how we deal with, access to finance.
Okay. So you did all of this research, you wrote this book. How have the formal cooperatives responded to the book? There's this gap, I sense, that gap between formal co-ops and these grassroots solidarity economic institutions. How can this gap be bridged, sir? Well, first, has been a response to the formal co-ops. And if this gap exists like I think it does, then how can we bridge the gap?
Yeah, that's a good question, Vernon. And I think your hunch is correct. In the early days, this book or this work was sort of questioned. It created a lot of havoc for me as an academic, in so many ways, paralleling the experience of erasure of women who practice Raska systems in the world. There was a silencing that Roskas are even a part of the cooperative system because of their informality. And I kind of understand this, if you're a cooperative, you're already marginalized within the economic
In the
system.
capitalistic system, yeah.
Right. So why would they see broadening their tent to include mostly Black and racialized Indigenous people who use cooperativism purposefully and informally? Why would they see that as an advantage? And to more conservative, I call them fanatics within the formal cooperative sector, could not wrap their heads around how people of color know about cooperatives, right? Like that was the first issue. I've read so many things coming out of the academy where they have to teach people about cooperatives. There's this default that people of color, particularly people of African descent, don't know what a co-op is. And I feel that story needed a reckoning. And that's where the banker ladies and the Raska system is particularly useful, because they're showing us that there is a story that needs to be told, and they have been doing this kind of work for a very long time. So the cooperative sector now, in 2026, are really, at least in the province of Ontario where I live, are supportive. They have come on side. They are understanding that Roscas are a part of a cooperative movement. They are learning what it means to share the space with other kinds of cooperators. I mean, initially they thought they were an underdeveloped co-op and they had to develop into or graduate into a real cooperative. But now they've come to an understanding, because the banker ladies are so patient and gentle in teaching them, that cooperativism, and I use that term broadly, includes both informal and formal cooperative institutions. In Collective Courage by Professor Jessica Gordon Nembhard, she wrote a book in 2014, which clearly spelled out, the informal making. There we go. There's the book you're holding up. The making of informal co-ops had to be because of sabotage or criminality. And so when people have an awakening like they did in 2020 about anti-Black racism, they are now learning that Roscas are a place of refuge when business exclusion and violence in our economic system is happening to certain ethnic communities. And here in Toronto, it's happening to Persians, Iranians, it's happening to people of the Chinese and Indian diaspora. Many of these cultural communities have had to rely on their own vernaculars, whether they are calling it Hua in China or Chit in India or Gamea or Sanduk with Persians. I mean, they're relying on these ancient money systems, collective in nature, so that they can attend to their livelihood needs and to also stymie the harm and discrimination that they are encountering as both women and women of color. And so what we're finding is that cooperative sector is now realizing here in Toronto that they need to make room for these Rosca cooperators because it only grows the movement. If you're a Rosca user and you're welcome in the formal co-op system, then it's likely that you are going to bank with one of the larger credit unions here in our country. Right now, the banker ladies, and I know last year sometime you had Andrea Barrett on your show. She's the director of the Rosca Network here in Canada, which is a consortium of banker ladies that are really advocating for the right of a different kind of cooperator. And they're being really well supported by the Ontario Cooperative Association, with Jennifer Ross at the helm of that, really making space and creating support for this new Rosca network to thrive. The Rosca network here in Canada has received significant funding from one of our largest credit unions called Meridian Credit Union to help promote and educate people so that we can stop the harms that are affecting Rosca users in Canada, who right now are hiding their Rosca systems, irrespective of what cultural group they belong to, because there is a lot of fear-mongering and criminalization, freezing of their assets, and just general stigma attached to when Black women choose informal economic cooperation. They're viewed as something illegal or illicit. And so right now, this Rosca movement, and you can look at a film, it's a free film on Films for Action, and it's called The Banker Ladies. I hope listeners will watch it on filmsforaction.com. It's free, it's 23 minutes. It was produced by a Haitian Canadian by the name of Ernst, I'm slipping his name.
That's okay.
Mondesir, Ernst Esri Mondesir. He is the film director. The DISE Collective produced this film because the banker ladies wanted an educational piece to stop the violence, stop the harm, and to recognize the labor that they're doing to make Canada and other places better by growing a more democratic financial system.
Well, it's good news that they're getting some positive feedback,
sure.
positive promotion. Now, change it a little bit to personal. So you said they wanted to stop the violence and the harm. I understand that you have been sued for your work, that you are called a racist and a feminist, that you are a sexist. You go against men and you go against white folk. How's that been? What's that like for you?
So Everything Co-op has done excellent research on finding out lots of things. Actually, you can find in ravel.ca. It is an online zine, pretty left of the spectrum. And I wrote about something called academic freedom. And so in that piece, it's a larger story of being a Black woman in the academy and what academic freedom looks like to different kinds of faculty and scholars. And in that, I do mention one story where at the end of 2024, December, I remember it because it was a few days after Christmas Day, that I was served with a human rights tribunal notice that I was being accused of being anti-white and anti-male. It's a case of reverse discrimination. I think in the US, it might be seen as something as those slap cases to really diminish public participation. That's how I'm viewing it. But it is a horrifying experience to be dealt with what I see as a vexatious case against me. It's still in proceedings, so I'm careful and mindful of what I say because, when these issues of reverse discrimination happens, it is a very costly exercise with lawyers, but it takes a toll on one's mental health.
Mm-hmm.
Just because you become demonized for the work that you're doing when I should be protected I should be protected to have the freedom of speech as a scholar. And so, yes, I was teaching a course on global development. The white male student was unsatisfied by the kinds of teachings that I was having, particularly when it had to deal with colonization and extraction issues and racial capitalism. And so those topics in 2025, 2026, this was back in 2022 when I was teaching the course, could be perceived by Eurocentric people as being discriminatory towards them.
Wait, I'm sorry. You're telling the truth about colonization, extraction, how they have taken from native folks, from African people, from Chinese, Indian, and they take. And for that, you are said you're discriminating against them for telling the truth.
Yeah, and that's where we are. That's where we are right now in Canada, in the US, in parts of Europe. There is now backlash against particularly Black feminist speakers who are coming out and speaking truth. And I'm not alone when it comes to these kinds of issues. But you can see how the research that I'm doing on informal institutions focused on theory and literatures that have been largely uncited strategically by certain scholars. And now that I am now producing literatures, drawing on theories by Black and racialized and Indigenous people who speak to the experience of Black women cooperators, how that might be viewed as reverse discrimination,
Let me,
right?
let me get a question. You mentioned that it's costly, particularly legal. It's costly mentally. It's costing with stress, with all kinds of things. How can we support you, particularly with the financial side? Do you have a GoFundMe? Is there any way that me and the audience can support you in the fight to tell the truth?
Wonderful. Thanks for asking. Actually, in December, the Banker Ladies have organized a GoFundMe. It's GoFundMe Help Caroline Hossein Fight for Social Justice. It's on the GoFundMe platform. Just Google my name, Caroline Hossein, Hossein, and you will see the request. I mean, the idea that Black women in the academy working on economic issues for people of color will not be welcomed should not be a surprise to listeners. I mean, when we're trying, there is an elitism that exists within the academy. And what we're trying to do is really to upset that game. And thank you so much for listening and for thinking about the Banker Ladies and having me on.
Well, I need to get your Caroline, Hossein, on the GoFundMe platform. Fight for Justice?
Yeah, fight for social justice.
Okay. So we only have 30 seconds. Do you have a message you want to leave people with?
Yeah,
Cool.
I think that if you can share information about the Rosca system and the Banker Lady system, push cooperative, formal co-ops to recognize them, you'd be doing a huge service to expanding more equitable economic development. Thank you.
And if you're in a community and you need funding or financing to start your business or whatever, start a Rosca. Start one yourself. You can get this book and learn how to start it.
For sure.
Caroline, thank you so much. Everybody out there, we'll see you next Thursday. Please live cooperatively.